Hello, hi, Molade.
Hey, Osama. Can you hear me clearly?
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Awesome,
Happy that it's
awesome,
almost the
awesome.
weekend. Really happy that it's almost the weekend, so we can whine and
I imagine. Good to have you here, and
good.
welcome to the Wave Speaker Series. That's in its
Yay, I've been
final.
waiting for my opportunity.
It's in its final week. It's the last stretch of the speaker series that we started a few weeks ago, and we've had some very interesting speakers come on. We have looked at Upwork. We had looked at the hospitality industry. We had discussed about digital marketing. We had talked about CVs, writing
Mhm,
compelling CVs. We had talked about emotional intelligence. Uh, we
mhm.
talked we talked about so many things. The list is endless, but all to be able to get people to learn, to get people to
Yes,
really develop themselves in these times that we're in. I mean,
yes,
we are certainly in very interesting times, and there's a lot of pivoting going on. There's a lot of self-development going on, and it's
yeah,
it's important that we continue to seek knowledge, and not just seek and gain knowledge, but we also try to apply it, because I think, as they say, it's really in the application of what we learn. All right.
for
So
sure.
today we're going to be discussing. Oh, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, I was saying that there's been so much learning opportunities in this season that it's been remarkable actually. I mean, I feel like if you really had a skill gap which you had identified and you really wanted to close that gap, this season was an excellent opportunity to do it because people that you otherwise may have had to pay for their courses, they were just doing free courses
Really,
up and down.
really.
Amazing, amazing. And me, one of my core strengths is being a learner. So what that meant was that I was just soaking up every single knowledge wherever I could find it.
Yeah,
And I love that saying that goes, the day you stop learning is the day you die. So find the opportunity, do it,
yeah.
and yeah, I'm super excited.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I guess that just leads us into the conversation for today. I mean, I'm sure that there's some connection to what you have said with what we're going to be discussing today, because there is a
Yes.
lot. Sometimes learning gets quite overwhelming if you're not careful. So we'll just go straight into it. But I'll allow you quickly introduce yourself. For those people who may be on this call and who do not know who you are, I would leave you to do justice to the very brief introduction.
Okay, all right. Very, very brief. My name is Molade Adeniyi. I work with WAVE, West Africa Vocational Education. I like to call myself um, the chief servant of WAVE. It's a term that has just really sort of endeared to me, really, to be honest. Um, I have the pleasure of leading the amazing team at WAVE, where we have the vision um, to give every young African the skills and the opportunities to become all that they imagine. And we do that through various soft skills training programs, as well as some other sort of work we do on the side. So yeah, so that's kind of me in a nutshell. I'm a mother, and and I have a beautiful 10-year-old.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Molade, for sharing that with us. And today we're going to be discussing something very, very interesting, and I'm sure something that's very pertinent to a lot of the people who are on this live session with us.
Yeah.
And that is managing work stress.
Hmm.
Managing work stress. A few years ago, there was some research done, and Lagos came out as the third most stressful city, only behind Syria, and I think it was Iraq or one of the Middle East countries. Lagos
I mean,
was
places where there's
uh,
war
the
and there's conflict.
most stressful city. I haven't
Yeah.
updated report to check whether we've moved down, down the table. But that is to say that stress is something that's really, really important to address, and it's something that a
Yeah.
lot of people can relate to. Even before COVID hit. So this was before COVID hit. The report was out. Now COVID hit. We can only imagine how much stress people are under at this time. So managing work stress. So let's go straight into it, right?
Yeah.
Work stress. what
Yeah.
really is stress? I mean, we hear stress all the time. We hear people say, "Oh, I'm stressed." We hear people say, I'm under immense stress. It's ridiculous." What exactly is stress? How do we demystify this term called stress? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. So I would give a definition, but I wanted us. I mean, I know that people might be watching this and joining us from all over all over the world. But you picked on something that was critical when you talked about the Nigeria being number 3 in that sort of stress rating. And there's a lot of things that can cause us stress as human beings. From the power situation, imagine you kind of wake up. I mean, I remember there was a morning that I woke up. I was already late for work because my alarm didn't go off, and then I turned on the tap and there was no water coming from the tap. It was like, what else could make this day go bad? So you are now thinking what you have to do. Okay, we need to go and fetch water in a bucket from somewhere. We need to sort of make that happen. And then you get outside and you realize that the car doesn't start because something has happened, and then you're unable to move. The stress levels are already building. I mean, that is like everyday stress. But when we kind of bring it back to the workplace, when we talk about work stress simply relates to when there is your ability or your competence doesn't sort of match the end result that you are expected to get. And what happens with that is then you begin to sort of have some stress signs, and you begin to sort of have some stress symptoms. And hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I want us to not confuse stress and pressure. Pressure in the workplace can be termed as good, because pressure makes people push themselves beyond what they can do today and move and sort of move past that to achieve, greater results. The difference with stress is that stress actually stops you from achieving those results. So that's the difference. And then when pressure gets too much, when pressure gets too high, I mean, imagine, let me use an analogy of you are cooking a pressure cooker. Everybody uses a pressure cooker, right? You use pressure cooker to get meat and things to get soft very, very quickly. That pressure is good. But the reality is, if you keep that pressure cooker on endlessly, the thing will eventually burn. And that's not the desired outcome. So pressure is good to a point. Beyond that, it starts causing stress. Other than that, you have things like work-related stress just happens to be when your ability, your competence is just not at the same level as what it is that you need to deliver on, and then you begin to sort of get stressed.
Awesome.
So let me stop there, because I can ramble on and on. I can talk. I can overpower you, Osarame, so I will calm myself down.
It's okay. But that's very interesting, Molade, because you distinguish between pressure and stress, and you talk about stress being, very obvious, very prominent when the competencies, there's a mismatch or there's a gap between the competencies that you have and the expectations in terms of your delivery or your performance on the job.
That's one aspect of stress. There's some other things as well, which I hope we'll talk about later, that can also cause work stress. But yes, it's mostly when there is that sort of, the pressure is just too high. Like I explained, the pressure is too high and you're unable to kind of meet that pressure. That's when you begin to sort of get stressed.
Stress, absolutely. So there's pressure. Pressure is good when it's not too much. Yeah, pressure is good when it's not too much, because it pushes us, right? It pushes us to get things done. It pushes us to achieve more. But there's a thin line between excessive pressure and then we get overwhelmed. So we're mindful of not getting to a point where there's so much pressure, or we're applying too much pressure either on ourselves or on other people. Thank you for that. Now, talking about stress, and you mentioned a few things which you said was one aspect of workplace stress or stress at work. What are some of the things that in the workplace now, because we're trying to drill this down to the workplace specifically, what are some of the things aside what you had mentioned that could contribute to stress in the workplace? So I don't have the competence, and there's certain expectations of me, and I'm under stress. What else can because I'm going to ask you what we can do in terms of remedies, but what else? Let's outline the other things that could contribute to stress at work.
Yeah, so you know what? Let's even talk about what's happening right now, right? So COVID-19 hit the whole world unexpectedly. If anybody had told us that this thing was coming and this is the impact, everybody would have said, "Come on, there's no way." And one of the things that it brought, unfortunately, was there was a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty whether your job will be safe, uncertainty whether you will get a salary at the end of the month, or how long you will continue to get a salary for. Uncertainty in the workplace, uncertainty for the future is another stress factor. So imagine I'm in a job. I don't know if I'm going to if I'm going to have a job tomorrow, if I'm going to be able to survive this time. That one is immense work stress. Another one is when we talk about increased workload. So your workload, so in some certain organizations, maybe somebody has been fired or somebody resigned who you used to work together. They did not replace that person, and then you now have the job of two people. So increased workload, you keep doing that, you still need to deliver, can cause stress as well. Now, some difficult employees, or let me not call them difficult, let's just say co-workers, can also cause you stress. So you don't get along with this person. Every time you try to talk, this person puts you down, or this person, it just seems to be a cog in the wheel every single time. Somebody's asking what we're talking about. So we're talking about managing work stress generally.
Manage work stress.
Just and similar question. So the other thing also remember is long hours and lack of sleep. So sometimes we all feel like I would do 12 hours at work. I need to put in those 12 hours at work, and then I go home and then I put in another 3 hours. Those sort of things. I mean, you feel like you are on a high, but it's almost like a drug. When you start taking that drug, you're on a high. Eventually, there's going to be a crash and burn. And all of those factors, and this is just a few things that can cause stress in the workplace. There's a lot more. Imagine a pressure to perform. Maybe there's a promotion coming up, or there's your performance review coming up, and you just put this pressure on yourself. I need to perform. I need to tick all of the boxes because I need to move on. Putting that pressure on yourself could invariably cause you stress. So those are some examples of workplace stressors.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Molade. Very apt. Thank you for that. So you mentioned that one other thing that could. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So you mentioned workload. So once the workload gets too much, more than it's supposed to be, then stress could set in. You also talked about worry. You talked about anxiety. Especially using this COVID season as an illustration or analogy.
Yeah.
And you said that, for some people who are worried about whether I still have a job tomorrow, whether I'm still going to be employed a few months down the line, and that anxiety begins to trigger some stress, and so you mentioned these things and how they influence people's performance. You also talked about, employers, and I think that it's also important at this time for us to, look at it from the side of employers. What are some things that employer, hiring managers, employers, business owners at this time can begin to do to remedy the situation? So, I mean, you may not be able to completely remove stress for people, but how do you just manage, again, we're saying managing work stress. What are some things that you think employers, business owners can do or can begin to think about in managing the stress of their teams at this time?
So that's very interesting that you raised that, Osarame, because I was going to mention that in a workplace, stress can be either from the employers. There are things that the employers can do, and then there are things as an employee that I can do. If you're an employer, you're listening to this and you're watching this, I'm sure you know some of those things, but we sometimes forget. So for instance, working conditions is extremely important. What kind of working conditions are you providing for the people that you're working with, that are working for you? Inadequate working conditions, not the right sort of work tools, all of those things can add to the stress of the people who work with you. And the working condition doesn't have to be, we're not talking about 5-star rating here, but is it comfortable enough for people to be able to work and for them to sort of enjoy the work that they're doing? As an employer, have you set expectations? Do people know exactly what it is that they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how they're supposed to do it? a lot of times, an employee gets stressed because today your boss comes and tells you to do this. Tomorrow you do that same thing, then the boss comes and says, no, this is the one that I want you to do. Then by day 3, it changes again. So the goalpost keeps shifting. The expectations keep changing. There's no clear expectations for your employees. So they're not able to really sort of, understand what it is that they're doing, and they keep getting stressed. And the last thing that I would mention, I mean, there's a lot of things, but from an employer's perspective, the last thing that I would mention is, how have you created an avenue for your employers to actually de-stress? So I would toot the horn of Wave a little bit here. So we have some initiatives that we do. So like a TGIF on the last Friday of every month, even though during this season, it's been a bit difficult to do that. But the whole idea of the TGIF at the end of the month is let everybody come together, is de-stress, we play games, we have fun, we eat, whatever it is, and we just kind of relax. What are you as an employer? What processes have you put in place to allow your people to actually relax? I worked in an organization where you couldn't eat your lunch at your desk. You had to get up and go into the into the canteen for you to actually eat your lunch. So as an employer, have you prepared a place where people can go and sit and eat? Or are they forced to sort of eat at their desk? So there's just little things that employers can do. And lastly, have you created an environment where people can talk about these issues? So do your employees feel like they can come and talk to their immediate line manager or to you if they have issues? Or do they feel like they're going to, if I go and talk to them, they're going to shout at me and create even more stress? So these are little things that we need to do, various check-ins, etc., that help from an employer's perspective, that will sort of help employees manage work stress. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Molade. I mean, very interesting suggestions that you had put out for employers who are watching to adopt and begin to practice in their businesses. I think it's really critical that employers begin to pay a lot of attention to managing stress for their employees. But you also mentioned initially that it's important for employees to share in that responsibility, because at the end of the day, I'm the one who's getting stressed. My boss may try to do so much to try and help me manage the stress, but I also share in the responsibility. What are some of those things that you think I can do as an employee who's on this call and saying, I'm just stressed and I'm thinking of ways, to manage this. I'm thinking of ways to still maintain performance, the level of performance that I've always delivered at, but I'm struggling with this stress, right now at work.
Okay, so I'm gonna dive into those. I mean, and I wrote them down because I didn't want to forget. There was quite a few points that I wanted to talk about on this. But before we talk about what an employee can do, can we even talk about why are we even concerned about this work stress? Is it even a bad thing? There's somebody out there who's saying, "Hey, I'm stressed. I get overwhelmed. It's okay. I get over it." But the reality is that there are many negative effects from work-related stress. So even physical. So there are people, I've talked about people being anxious, people being depressed. I mean, I know of somebody who was getting constant headaches, could not understand why they were getting constant headaches. And the only thing we were able to drill it down to eventually was that it was a work-related stress. And once we were able to deal with that work-related stress, the headaches stopped. Just like that. So there's many reasons why we want to deal with this workplace stress. Problems at home is also a reason. You take your stress from the office, you take it to your house. So whether you are married or you're not married, your housemates, your parents, you will take it out on someone. Those relationships begin to suffer because you are not dealing with this work stress. Again, if you don't deal with the work stress, I talked about working with your co-employers might be the reason for your stress. One day, if you're not dealing with it, you might end up punching somebody in the face. And I dare say that punching somebody in the face could end up being something bigger, because they're going to say something one day because you haven't dealt with it, and then it becomes, a really big deal. So there are many reasons why this conversation is important, and why we must be aware, first of all, that that it exists and that we must do something about it. And everybody goes through it. So do you want me to go straight into some things that employees can do?
Yes, I just wanted to also just add to what you had said in terms of the effect, and I was going to ask something before you do that. But as you talked about the effects, the adverse effect of stress, on individuals, it reminded me of some documentary that Professor Dr. Bruce Lipton had put out concerning stress and the link between stress and our immune system. He talks about, in his video, I think it's also available on YouTube. He's actually written a book called The Biology of Beliefs, and he talks about how our emotions, our feelings, ultimately influence our health and our well-being, So as you spoke about that now, it just reminded me, especially in this COVID, his theory was that, the immune system is highly compromised when we're under immense stress. And so the higher the stress level of an individual, the lower the immune system becomes. And so the antibodies are not able to fight against any intrusions in the body at that time. So I think that's also just consolidating what you had said about the importance of actually managing stress, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in our personal lives. And I wanted to ask, is stress a good thing? Can stress ever be a good thing, or can stress ever have positive effects? Is it possible?
So I think I would say no to that, and people might argue, and that was why I wanted to differentiate between stress and pressure, especially pressure sort of in a workplace. I think once you begin to have stress, there's some hormones that are also released, and those hormones begin to sort of have adverse effects. You're unable to think rationally once stress comes in because of some of these symptoms and some of the side effects or some of these signs. You begin to miss deadlines. You begin to have reduced productivity. So in no way, I think as much as possible, you should remove stress from anything that you do, because I've not known any sort of positive attributes to stress. But again, let's differentiate stress and pressure. So I think that was why I wanted to make that distinction at the beginning.
All right, thanks for that. So pressure, a little bit of pressure is good because it forces us to do more. It forces us to achieve. We need to also be mindful of how much pressure is being applied so that we don't get overwhelmed. I think once we cross that line of getting overwhelmed, it now becomes stress, right? Can we safely say that every time there's pressure, either externally or internally, and it goes beyond what we can manage or what is good for us, then it becomes a stressful situation?
Yeah, for sure. And I use my pressure cooker analogy again. Those of us that cook and know about pressure cookers, you love them because it makes your meat, like for example, I cook beans in my pressure cooker, I cook things like oxtail in my pressure cooker, it gets it nice and succulent quickly. But the reality is when I put it on for too much longer than it needs to be, it starts to burn. It doesn't give me what I need to. So there's a turning point, if you like. And once you cross the line, then it starts becoming an adverse reaction. Yeah. Okay.
So don't break your elastic limit. Is what Molade is saying. Caution. Yes. You know how they have those caution signs or signals on the road when you're trying to do your driver test or you're learning how to drive. So caution, don't break your elastic limit. Make sure you're mindful of it. All right, thanks, Molade. So you wanted to share a few things that you said you had written down as it pertains to the employee, So let's hear those things that you wanted to.
Okay, so I'm going to be reading out the headings because I wanted to make sure that I go through everything. So the first point I have down here is to identify your stressors, including the self-imposed stressors. So for a lot of us, there are certain things that get us stressed. The first key to any kind of getting help, moving beyond anything, even if it's an addiction, whatever it is, identify what causes you stress. Now, some people know what it is already. Some people will come on here and say it's a difficult boss, it's a co-worker, whatever it is. You need to sort of identify stress. And what are some signs that you are stressed? There's palpitation. Sometimes some people get palpitations. They get sweaty palms. They get a little bit frazzled. I talked about headaches earlier. So if you're unsure, those are some signs that you can maybe sort of look out for. But number one is to identify those stressors. And the key to identifying those stressors, the key to identifying those stressors is once you're able to identify them, then you can now begin to put steps to actually preventing them from affecting you. Now, I tell a group of young people that I mentor that you can control what you say, how things affect you, but you cannot control what others say and how they say it. I don't know if that sort of makes any sense. So what that means is, if I know that every time I go into my boss's office to present something, they will first, he or she will first of all shout, raise their voice, do whatever it is, and that gives me stress, which means I'm unable to deliver the rest of my presentation. When you identify that that is a stressor, before you have that meeting, you're already talking to yourself, you psych yourself up, you know that, regardless of what I'm going to see, I'm going to continue this to the end. How do I, not let that reaction sort of affect me? Now, that's a very simple explanation, but you have to sort of identify and learn how to sort of react. Number 2, and I love this, it's deep breathing or mindful breathing. Now, it's not yoga, it's not anything woo-woo, but there's some times where with mindful breathing, it's just a case of, okay, I'm feeling a little bit stressed right now. Maybe I'm in a meeting, or maybe I'm outside an interview. I'm about to go in for an interview and I'm feeling very stressed. Deep breathing or mindful breathing just basically means you take in 5 deep breaths, count to 5, you take in breaths, and you let go 5 times. You do that a couple of times. And you know what? I know it sounds very weird or very cliche, but it actually works. It actually just helps you center everything, and you're like, okay, let's start from the beginning. So deep breathing, mindful breathing is my number 2. Number 3, for those that have work stress because of so many things going on. We talked about workload earlier. My number 3 is to eliminate interruptions. So imagine, Osarome, I don't know if it happens to you. You have a deadline that you're working on your computer. And as you're working on that computer, you see email popping up. You see an Asana task popping up. You see this popping up. And for some people, those things automatically begin to give them goosebumps and their hearts begin to beat very, 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 very quickly. Yet you are working on something right there and then. So what I would say to that is there are some sort of time management techniques that you can use. So I, for instance, if I'm working on a major project, I close down my email and I close down any other thing that can pop up. So nothing pops up on the side. And that way it helps me not to even see those. There's so many other things you can do as well. Block out time to say, this time is I'm working, and this time I'm not doing anything else. If you know that that is a stressor for you, make sure that you sort of pick on that. Number 3, and I talked about this earlier, is schedule your day for energy and focus, is how I like to do it. So a lot of us, like I said, think we can work 12-hour, 14-hour days just to achieve work, but you need those breaks. There's actually some school of thought that says after every 90 minutes of work, you should get up and do something. Get up and take a walk, even if it is just walk outside of the gate of your office and walk right back. Get up and stretch, do some sort of workplace exercises, but you have to sort of keep moving. Take frequent breaks as much as you can. I'm very guilty of this. I say it to people, but I don't do it. Don't eat at your desk. Try as much as possible to take your lunch to somewhere else and have your lunch. The problem with eating at your desk is, one, you're not even really enjoying the food, because all you're trying to do is you're still trying to work. But it's also a way of sort of minimizing stress as well. Because I'm a pharmacist, I will add this. I'm also, in another life, I'm a pharmacist. I would add eating right and sleeping well. A lot of us don't eat right. A lot of us eat a lot of junk food. A lot of us eat on the go, processed food, high fat type of foods, etc. You would be surprised that if your diet is great and you are getting an adequate amount of sleep, you actually reduce the amount of stress that comes your way. And lastly, 2 more things. The next one is, I like this. I coined it, prioritize your priority. So prioritize your priority.
Priority. Interesting.
Yes. It is critical to know what is really important, right? I don't know if I'm sure you have, Osarome, you've heard of the Pareto's principle, which states that many events, roughly, 80% of the effect comes from 20% of the causes, right? Yeah. But a lot of times we all want to do everything. how do you do your priority list every single day? What are those things that I need to get done? What is the 20% that would give me 80% achievement, as an example? You can either do that through writing down your to-do list. Every single day, you're writing down what I need to do, cross them off so that you feel like I've achieved things when they're done. Or you can do, there's a Eisenhower time matrix, which divides your tasks into urgent and important. Urgent and not important, not urgent but important, not urgent and not important, and really have a holistic look. I mean, honestly, Osarome, there's a lot to be said about spending the first 30 minutes of your day just prioritizing what you need to do. What are those things that you must do every single day? Put them at the top of your list and make sure you are working through it systemically. That way, your eye is focused. What happens a lot of times is you don't write down anything, you don't prioritize anything. Then at the end of the day, you realize that the big things are not done. And you've done a lot of small things that are not really, affecting the whole. So prioritize your priority and make sure that you keep your eye on the ball. And lastly, I would say talk to somebody. Work stress is real. Anxiety is real. Depression is real. If it's really affecting your work, if it's affecting your mind, find somebody to talk to. It might be someone in your workplace, if the workplace allows that. Or you might actually just need to look for a trusted friend somewhere that you can actually speak to. But it's very, very important that you find someone to talk to. If it is somebody in the office that is affecting you, that is causing you stress, maybe find a way of talking to them. How do you maybe let them know? They might not know. It might just be their way of, this is just their way. They don't hate you. They don't dislike you. But you need to let them know that, the way you do this, affects me this way and it causes me a bit of stress. If you're unable to talk to them, find somebody else you can take. I don't want to quote the Bible here, but find somebody else you can take to them to say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you on sort of Y and Z. So those are my sort of, I don't know how many there are, maybe 8 or 6 or something. Those are sort of my top tips.
They're about 8 top tips. 8 top tips. Very interesting, Molade. Thanks for sharing those. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call, I can see some comments saying, that's very helpful. That's really interesting. That's something I'm going to try. It's really important what you've shared, and I like the part of prioritize your priority, because sometimes we think that we have a priority list, and then we don't stick to prioritizing that list sometimes because there are different things, like you said, that would crop up along the way, and because we haven't really disciplined ourselves to follow our list, tendency to just veer off. And do some other things. And then at the end of the day, we spend so much time on the little things or the unimportant things, and then we find out that we haven't achieved much. But as you were speaking, somebody had given, so I'll go through, you had said eat well and sleep well. You had said talk to someone. You mentioned, you said quite a number of things. You said, we should make sure we speak to people. We should take breaks. You said take breaks. If you've worked for 90 minutes or 2 hours, 120 minutes, take a break. Even the soccer players take a break. The sportsmen, take a break. After an intensive first half of a game or first quarter of a game or whatever type of sport it is, there's usually a break. So take a break. You also mentioned that we have to minimize distractions. You talked about, the email notifications coming up. And now we have a lot of push notifications on our phone. So if you're working and you have your phone close to you and you have a lot of push notifications, you would definitely get distracted at some point. So minimize or shut out those distractions when you're working. And you had also said mindful breathing, very important. You said it's not anything spooky, but just take those deep breaths, pause for a moment, and do some sort of I don't want to call it meditation, but take those deep breaths. All right. So did you get my question? So I was saying I did.
I got the question.
All right.
So it's very interesting. People always associate eating well and eating healthy to expensive food or having a lot of money. The reality is, when we talk about eating well and we talk about eating healthy, I wrote down something here. It's eating a low sugar, maybe a high protein diet, for example. So there are some foods that, and it's not about cut. I mean, if you speak to a nutritionist and people who are who talk about healthy eating, it's not about cutting off all the foods that you like, but everything is about proportion, right? So for instance, me, I know some people would disagree with me. If I get home at night and I eat pounded yam and a foriro with cow leg and, you know, a big piece of goat meat, sleep is going to be difficult for me. It's going to be very, very impossible for me. But I know one thing I used to tell clients then. So you see my fist. So if you like swallow, don't let your swallow not be more than the size of your fist, whatever your fist is. I'm sure there are some people that are like, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Because those are carbohydrates, right? Things like swallow, rice, etc. Even the same thing with all your carbs. I say, look at the size of your fist. So your rice should not be more than that. Your swallow should not be more than the size of your fist. And then add in a lot of vegetables. And vegetables doesn't have to be fancy vegetables. You know, put effort on your plate. Whatever it is that you can find, put a lot of that as opposed to sort of the carbs. Eat your meat, eat your that, but also do a lot of exercise. And exercise does not need a gym membership. Walk up and down the stairs if you have stairs in your house. Do it 20 times a day. Walk around, you know, your environment. Do that if you must. These days, there's lots of videos on YouTube on how to sort of do effective workout at home if you are just starting up. But it's just reduce your sugar. Reduce your sugar content. Sugar is the things that can cause obesity, that can increase your risk, and etc. etc. It's just healthy eating. And when you eat healthily, your mind is in a better place, and you're able to sleep. And you're able to sleep better as well. And really, as adults, we should be getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep. I cover my eyes, I cover my face, because I know that I don't necessarily get that many hours every single night. But sleep is such an important part of everything that you do. After a good night's sleep, you feel refreshed, you feel ready to go, and you feel ready to take on the next challenge. The problem a lot of us have is you don't sleep very well. You wake up, you're still tired, then you have to go into that, you know, for that interview, or you have to go for that meeting, and then you don't do as well as you know that you can do. So sleep is so important, and eating right is super duper important as well, and exercise.
Yeah. I mean, very, very interesting, Molade. Thanks for sharing that, and I hope that, you know, a lot of us who are on this call, you know, are taking you know, thoughts from that, because there's, you know, that there's usually that mindset. There's usually that thing that, oh, I can't do this. It's so expensive. We've just heard from Molade now that you can actually watch your portions in eating healthy and in trying to stay healthy. You don't have to buy anything expensive. It's about the portions. She talked about taking heavy carbs, carbohydrate, and looking at, you know, your fist, the size of your fist. I mean, for some people, their fist, you know, the size of the fist is pretty. It's not what you want to advise them to eat, but really just be mindful of the portions. And then you talked about, you know, low sugar. You talked about protein, and you know, reducing carbohydrate intake as well. So it's really, with the resources you have, you can still eat healthy. I think that it's just really being intentional about it. So we can all be intentional about what we eat. We can all be intentional about our sleep. Molade has also said that sleeping is very important. If you're having naps, for some people, naps work better for them, right? They just take naps. I remember we talked to a client sometime, and they were saying, oh, you know, a particular employee had said, once I have like a 30-minute, 45-minute nap, I'm good. You know, it refreshes me, rejuvenates me. So again, you know, you could have some of those naps. It doesn't have to be, and the quality of sleep is not determined by the longevity. Or, you know, Molade, do you agree that how long we sleep has no correlation with the quality of our sleep? Sometimes you find yourself, that it's happened to you. You might sleep for 2 hours and wake up refreshed. You might sleep for an hour. You might sleep for 3-4 hours and you're refreshed. And, you know, sometimes you're like, oh, why do I feel this way? I just slept for 4 hours or 3 hours. And then you could sleep for 6 or 8 hours sometimes and still not feel refreshed when you get up. So it's really about the quality of sleep that you have. So thank you for sharing that, Molade.
I I wanted to just add something very quickly because I think I saw a
Okay.
question earlier when somebody was talking about dealing with a difficult boss maybe as a form of stressor in the workplace. Now the
Mm.
reality is your state of mind is extremely important. If you can't
Yeah.
have a conversation with that person, like I've said earlier, you should have a conversation with that person. But you need to evaluate yourself. Are you doing the best that you can do in that role? Are there competency gaps? So imagine somebody comes to talk to me to say, Molade, you are giving me stress because all this work you're asking me to do, I don't know how to do it. I can't achieve it, etc., etc. That conversation will not go as well as if somebody comes to me and says, you know what, Molade, I realize that this task that you're giving me to do, I'm unable to do it. I have noticed the gaps in my in my level of competence. And I feel like if I can just reach this gap, we're able to sort of move forward. That's a more productive conversation. I always say, don't always start by looking at the other person as the problem. Look internally, look inwards and see what can I do? What is causing me stress internally that I can do to improve myself so that I can
Mm.
actually achieve and be more productive in the workplace. Yeah. And it
Mm.
might be home. Some people bring, issues from home into the workplace. And sometimes, again, you need to deal with those because if you don't deal with those and you bring them into the workplace, they begin to affect the job that you do and cause you stress
Mm.
overall. But more importantly, employers need to give an avenue for employees to have conversations, to be able to talk about the issues they're having and together begin to work to solve those problems. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Molade. We'll just do a brief, and then I'll allow you speak to some people because I'm mindful that we have some people on the call. I've seen a comment somebody had made earlier and said, this is so me right now because I am considering leaving my job, but I don't have another job waiting for me. So it's difficult for me to leave my job. I'm under immense stress but I don't have options, so I'd like you to speak to that person, but I'd just like to do a recap and on other people on the call who might be in similar experiences. But I just want to do a recap of everything that we have said, so that we can wrap up. We have a few minutes left, but it's been an interesting conversation. So we started by saying, that stress and pressure are two different things, right? And we said that you have to watch. With pressure, it can be good. It could be positive sometimes because it spurs us on to get certain things done. But we also had said that watch your elastic limit because once you break that elastic limit, it becomes stress and then you're getting yourself into a stressful situation. We also talked about how, it's important that we do not bottle up so much. If we have anything that's happening in the workplace that may be causing stress, we could have conversations, we could speak to people, where we talked about, the fact that there could be a competency gap that's also triggering this stressful situation for an individual. And we had said, look, if you have issues like that on your job, feel free to walk up to your manager, your line manager or your supervisor or anyone who leads you to say, hey, I'm having this issue because there's a gap. There are expectations that you have of me I can't meet because there's a competency gap, and then work together to see how you could bridge that gap so that you're reducing the stress on yourself. We also said that sometimes it's the worry. Worry could cause stress. You're thinking about tomorrow, about the future, about job security, whether your job is still going to be around over the next few months. We said, hey, you have to also be mindful of that so that you don't get yourself into a stressful situation. We said even if it's in the workplace and you find that it's a colleague that's causing you stress, have a conversation with that person. Sit down and, sometimes it may not be the way you see it. You might think this person is difficult, but the person on the other end might be saying, hey, maybe you are also difficult. And until you have that conversation and really understand what both of you are thinking and what's the intention behind your actions and words have been, you may not be able to move past that stressful situation. So that's another trigger that you want to pay attention to. And then Molade, you had also told us that, look, in trying to, as employers, in trying to reduce the stressful situations for employees, be very creative around, and you gave examples of WAVE and how there's a TGIF, which is an opportunity for people to unwind, for people to let their heads down, to really bond and just have fun after all the work, that has gone into the week or into the month. So it's very important that employers who are watching also take a leaf from that book. And I think that was very important. So get creative as an employer. Have things that just get people pumped up, and refreshed and ready to go on. And then you gave us, your 8 top points or steps.
Yeah.
By saying, look, practice mindful breathing. Somebody said, should we shut our eyes when we're doing the mindful breathing? I think you want to focus. You want to shut out everything. So I guess, you should shut your eyes when you're practicing deep breathing, so that you are present in the moment. Okay, you're not wandering, you're not daydreaming. So it's important that you take those deep breaths. And Molade had used that as an example to say that the deep breaths also just relax your entire body. They relax your entire body. And we said stress, the negative effects is that, it compromises your immune system. And then Molade had also said that it can build up and it can aggravate future. So people talk about, diverted aggression. So it builds up so much, you're not addressing it. And one day you could just blow out at someone. You could get physical or violent, and you want to avoid that. So address it. Mindful breathing. You also said eat well. You said we should sleep well as well. And we said that it's not about the number of hours. It's about the quality of sleep. And we said you don't have to have too much to eat well. Molade has said it. You don't need to have too much. It's about the portions, and it's about the balanced diet. We learned that when we were, in school. Balanced diet. Watch your carb portions, carbohydrates. Make sure that you're getting a healthy portion of food. Mix your proteins, get some vegetable, make sure that it's balanced. It doesn't have to be expensive. You also said shut out distractions, turn off notifications when you're working, make sure that you don't have those things coming in. And then I like how you capped it at the end. You said, prioritize your priorities. So make sure that even when you have a priority list, you're looking to go into, we all know the book, Eat the Frog, right? Some people would say start with the most difficult things or the most arduous things. It's that frog, So make sure that you're disciplining yourself to stick to your priority list. So that's been very, 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 very insightful. And I'm sure that a lot of people on the call, have gained some things that they would go and start practicing. Because as we said at the beginning, knowledge is not enough. It's good to learn. It's good to hear these things, but we all have, including myself, I have to go back and apply and practice, because the learning is in the doing. So I'd like you, in closing, as we wrap up, we have about 2-3 minutes left. Molade, just in closing, we have some people on this call. What are your parting words to them who are, going through stressful situations in the workplace at the moment, just to encourage them in the next 2 minutes? What do you have to say to them?
So, I think, first of all, I want to empathize with everybody who is going through a stressful situation. It can't be easy. When you're in a stressful situation, you're just not able to be the best that you know that you can be. But what is really critical is that, first of all, try and identify what is causing you that stress. And is there anything you can do to reduce that stress? So sometimes we get so overwhelmed, and then rather than focus on the solution, we focus on the problem. And the more you focus on the problem, the more the problem compounds. So the first step is take a step back and try and identify, why is this thing so overwhelming and what can I do about it? So some of the tips that I had shared earlier, you can walk through those and see if any of those help. Now, ultimately, I started off by also saying that your state of mind is extremely important. There is life beyond work. There is your family, there's friends, there's other things that you need to do. And there are some workplaces that you might be unable to function in for whatever reason. But you need to be true to yourself and be sure that you have tried every single thing possible. And it's not within me. Because if you don't deal with the issue, what will happen is you will leave there, go to another workplace, and the same thing will happen again. Because you haven't dealt with that issue, especially when it is an internal issue. If it is external, I've said, different things like try and talk to your boss, try and talk to your line manager, try and talk to other people. In organizations, you have people who, there's some people that seem to get along with this, this person that's causing you stress. Find out from them, what do you do? What makes things different for you? And at this point, I would recommend a book. I actually had 3 books that I wanted to recommend. I would recommend a book now called How People Tick. It's by Mike Labeling, How People Tick. What I love about that book is it talks about 50 different, I think it's even more than 50 different types of personalities in the workplace and what makes people tick. But the book goes beyond that and says, how do you work with these type of people? What are some sort of tips that you can use to sort of work with this type of people? So it's hard. And like I said, we always have to empathize, but make sure that, you know, you've done everything that you can. And if you need to leave, then you may need to leave. But if you don't deal with it, you will just take that stress to another work environment and the same things will sort of happen again. The second book that I want to recommend is called Managing Stress in the Workplace. How to Get Rid of Stress at Work and Live a Longer Life by Joe Martin. So how to Managing Stress in the Workplace by Joe Martin. Some of the tips that I have shared today came from that book. It's a very interesting read. And you can actually get an e-copy from Amazon, from other sort of book websites as well. So you don't actually need the physical copy. So it's called Managing Stress in the Workplace and it's by Joe Martin. Yes. And my last book recommendation really is for my prioritizing your priority tip. It's called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. So Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And that book essentially talks about, you know, what are those things what are the essential things that you need to do to be productive? So it talks a lot about, you know, I talked about those priorities, looking at the priorities. What are your sort of top things that you sort of need to do? So, I mean, that would be my parting words. Lastly, just to say, it's look beyond. You can control what you say. You can control the things that you do. You might not necessarily be able to control what somebody else does, how they say it, and how it comes out. So you need to sort of look beyond people's perspectives, look inwards, ask yourself, what can I do? How can I manage my own stress? What can I do what can I do to sort of de-stress? Have frequent de-stresses. I hate it when people don't take their annual leave. And they just keep that annual leave and then they say, okay, don't worry, don't give me annual leave, just give me money in exchange for my annual leave. No, the annual leave is there for a reason. Take that time off, even if you're not traveling or going anywhere. Just take that time off to de-stress. It is extremely, extremely important. And for those of us that live in Lagos, from just getting out of your door, you could be faced with stress. Just waking up in the morning, you could be faced with so many different sort of stress factors. So you need to learn how to manage it. So that would be my sort of last words on this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Molade, for this. It's been an interesting and insightful session today, and I have learned, and I'm sure that everyone on this live video or this live session has learned. And it's really for us to go back and apply and practice it. And remember that it's your responsibility to make sure that you're not overwhelmed and you're not in stressful situations for too long. So make sure. Thank you all for joining us. This has been the Wave Speaker Series. And it's been an amazing experience. And today we were discussing managing work stress. And Molade Adeniyi, the CEO of Wave, has been our special guest today. And she's given us incredible insight as to how we could start managing work stress. And she's spoken to us and encouraged us. And so if you're in that space right now, take the tips that have been shared and start living a healthier life and a more productive life, whether it's in the workplace or in your personal endeavor. So till the next time we have a speaker series, thank you for staying tuned and joining. And we're Wave, West Africa Vocational Education. If you'd like to hear or know more about us, you can visit. You can actually send a message to our handle. You can DM us at Wave Academies, and we'll be happy to respond to your inquiries. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Molade, once again. Have a wonderful day. Join us. And stay stress-free, all right?
Yes.
Stay stress-free. Take care.
No more stress.
No more
all right,
stress.
Everybody. Thank you all so much. Take care. Have a stress-free weekend.
Bye now.